And so, dear friends, uh, tonight I wanted to talk a little bit about, like I said, the goodness of suffering. Ty gave numbers of talks about the goodness of suffering. And what he meant about that was that suffering, if we put it to good use, uh, is definitely worthwhile. We can learn a lot, we can make progress on the path. If all we do is become victimized by it, it's really not good for much. So I was thinking about Ruth Bader Ginsburg and all of the discrimination she suffered and how she put it to really good use. So that reminded me of her. And then I also was thinking about our bodhisattvas. And we've talked about bodhisattvas in the past. Bodhisattvas are the embodiments of qualities. So they're considered to be beings who've achieved enlightenment, but have chosen to stay in this dimension until all beings are enlightened. So my guess is they're going to be here for a really, really long time. But be that as it may, they are, each one is endowed with certain qualities. And we have Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva of compassion, who is, the quality is deep listening. At each one of our ceremonies, we begin by reciting, doing a recitation to invoke these bodhisattvas, to remember who we are, to remember that this is who we are. And we always, when we invoke Avalokiteshvara, we aspire to learn your way of listening in order to help relieve the suffering in the world. You know how to listen in order to understand. We invoke your name in order to practice listening with all our attention and open-heartedness. And when it goes on about listening to what's being said, what's being left unsaid, and Ruth Bader Ginsburg did exactly that. She listened deeply to hear the suffering in the world. She listened in order to understand. And she was brilliant and had a very deep understanding. When I talk about the fact that she suffered, she was born into a lower middle class family in Brooklyn. And that's what she jokes about, that when they call her the notorious RBG, there was a rapper, the notorious BIG, and she said they had everything in common because they were both born and bred in Brooklyn. So she was from Brooklyn. Her mother, her dad was an immigrant from Odessa. Her mom she was brilliant. Ruth said she was one of the most intelligent people she'd ever met. And she couldn't complete her education. She left school at 15 in order to work to put her brother through school, because that was considered to be more important than educating women. So right there, we had her first inkling about discrimination and about gender inequality. And then her mother died just the day before her graduation from high school, which I'm sure left a very deep mark on her consciousness. And when she got invited to be, the day she accepted her appointment to the Supreme Court, she referred to her mother and said that she hoped that she could attain all the things her mother was not able to, because of the situation into which her mother was born. So instead of suffering and just being a victim, she constantly was looking deeply to see what needed to happen here to alleviate suffering. She went on to go to college. She went to Cornell. She met her husband, Marty, there, who was a gem. And he was, he was just, she said he was the very best thing that ever happened in her life. And she said that she was attracted to him because he was the first boy she met who cared that she had a brain. And he was pretty smart himself to be able to recognize that, because she was brilliant. And so Marty was a year ahead of her in school. And when he got out, he went to Oklahoma to do National Guard duty, I think it was. She followed him there, and they were married and had a baby. But in the process, she did the civil service exam, trying to get a job at Social Security. And she did really, really well, but she made the mistake of letting them know that she was 3 months pregnant. And so immediately they downgraded her score for the civil service, so she would get paid less money. And here we go again. She's once again discriminated against. So that left a little mark on her consciousness, I think, as well. She and Marty then went to Harvard Law School. And it was during the McCarthy era, she was incredibly impressed by the fact that all these people were being discriminated against, and the people who could help them were lawyers. And she realized the power of lawyers and was inspired. So she and Marty went to law school, and it turned out her family said, well, you can give it a try, and if all else fails, you have a husband who can support you. Oh dear. But anyway, she clearly did very, very well. He was a year ahead of her in school again. So when he was in his third year of law school, of college there, I think it was, he developed cancer. And the only treatment they had was a really radical radiation treatment. So she arranged with his friends to take notes during his classes. They would bring her the notes. She would type them up, take them to him in the hospital, and spend time with him, go home and take care of their, I think by then it was a 2 or 3 year old daughter, and take care of her, get her to bed, then do her own homework. And she said she was getting about 2 hours sleep a night. So at that time, she learned diligence, which is one of the paramitas. She was incredibly focused. In our practice, when we do our meditation, we try to retrain our minds so that we can choose where to place them, so that when they go running off into places that are not useful, we can bring them back to where we want them to be. She was an expert in this area. Her mother told her 2 things while growing up. One was to be a lady, which meant that you don't waste time on useless emotions like anger. And the other was to always be independent, that even if you found Prince Charming, you needed to be able to take good care of yourself. So those were the 2 pieces of advice she got. And when it came to being able to choose where to place her mind, she was notorious, as they say, but she was notorious for never getting really angry and never showing it, and being able to maintain her composure, speak softly, and get the job done, really be heard. Her granddaughter was interviewed, and she said that that's one thing that her grandmother told her, that never raise your voice. As soon as you do, you've lost the argument, that people don't listen to you anymore. And everybody who got interviewed about her says how soft-spoken she was. That didn't diminish her power at all. It increased it, actually. So we have Bodhisattva Manjushri. Manjushri is known for deep understanding. He has a knife that cuts through the illusion and gets to the heart of a problem. She was an expert in this area also, that one of her first cases when she became a lawyer, and she did become a lawyer, it turned out that Marty got out of school before she did. He couldn't get a job in Boston because he was Jewish. He went to New York in order to get a job, and she followed him and went to Columbia. She transferred from Harvard to Columbia Law School. And at Harvard, she shared the first place in her class with another person. She was one of two top students. She went to Columbia, was first in her class when she graduated, and was unable to get a job because she was Jewish, she was a woman, and she had a child. She said she had 3 strikes against her. Once again, she experiences discrimination. Well, luckily, she had a professor at Columbia that was a very smart guy, evidently, and appreciated her brilliance. And he told his friend who owned a law firm that if he didn't hire her, he would never send him another clerk. So that convinced him for some reason, and she got hired, and she did a terrific job. She was able to, when I say Manjushri, cutting through illusion, she didn't get caught in the surface of things. When she was looking at inequality, she didn't get caught in simply advocating for women, that she was looking for gender equality, and she knew that if she would, in the cases that she chose, she tried 6 cases before the Supreme Court before she ever was before she was a justice. She won 5 of the 6. The first, and each one she chose because they'd set a precedent. And the first one she chose was for a man who was being discriminated against because his wife had died. She died in childbirth, so he had a brand new baby, and he was not able to collect Social Security because at the time only widows could collect Social Security since the men were considered to be the breadwinners. And she could see, took that sword and cut right through the surface of things and saw that as gender inequity and very discriminatory, and took it to the Supreme Court and won. And the part that I love the most about Ruth Ginsburg was, along with being unbelievably focused and brilliant and dedicated and passionate about what she did, she was, I think, one of the world's best friends. That she was able to maintain these beautiful relationships with people. This man that she had helped get Social Security remained a lifelong friend. That the baby that he was taking care of, when that baby got to be college age, she wrote references for him to get into Columbia University. And when that man was 77 years old, he married for the 2nd time, and Ruth officiated at his wedding. Like that. So she built these relationships. It wasn't just all business. It was actually caring about and developing relationships with people. So she definitely used this sort of understanding, and she knew that if she'd be advocating for men in terms of gender inequality, it was going to be much easier for her then to advocate for women as well. So we also have that Bodhisattva Samantabhadra. The Bodhisattva Samantabhadra is the Bodhisattva of great action. And it's just, he's considered to bring joy to one person in the morning, alleviate suffering of one person in the afternoon. And I think that Ruth did that for sure. Not only was she able to bring joy to people, not only was she able to alleviate enormous suffering for every woman. If you are a woman and in the United States right now, you have benefited because of the cases that she tried. So she's benefited everybody and alleviated a lot of suffering for a lot of people. And she also, it was very interesting because Marty, her husband, was known for having a great sense of humor. And she said that he just kept her laughing all the time. And her granddaughter had a bone to pick about that. She said, everybody portrays my grandmother as being very sober, and that Marty was the funny one. She said, but it takes somebody with a sense of humor to appreciate somebody with a sense of humor. And she said her grandmother had a wonderful sense of humor as well. So, and she was also a woman of great action, no doubt about it. She was up against insurmountable odds a whole lot of the time, and she still just hung right in there, resisted, and kept right on going. Even when she lost cases, she would write the what do you call it? The dissent. She would write the dissent, and her dissents were so powerful that some of them then got acted on by Congress. So whatever the courts wouldn't do, Congress might take her up on that and act on it. She is very, very wise. And then there's Ksitigarbha. Ksitigarbha is the Bodhisattva that goes into the hell realms to help all of the people that are trapped there. And that we have the choice of creating heaven or hell on earth. And I think Ruth went to a lot of those hell realms to help a lot of people and create a lot more heavens on earth. When I talk about the, then there's Sadaparibhuta. Sadaparibhuta is the Bodhisattva of deep respect, who has respect for everyone, who sees the Buddha nature in everyone, no matter what. And it turns out that Ruth had that quality in spades, that it was so beautiful. The night that she died, I felt horrible. I was absolutely distressed. I was just devastated by the news. And then I spent almost all night watching tributes to her on television. And I got so inspired by listening to these stories. She had, I thought it was 156, but today I heard it was 159 clerks in her tenure on the bench. And she maintained relationships with just about all of them. It didn't matter how many years had passed, if they came down with an illness or if there was a death in the family, whatever, she would be there. And if they had a new baby, they said that they would always get onesies that would have a grand clerk on them. Instead of grandchild, it would have grand clerk on the onesie for the new baby. And it was so moving to me today to see that when the hearse came up with her casket, the pallbearers were all of her clerks, and then the whole front patio of the Supreme Court was all standing there, were all of her clerks from the past. And it was just so moving. When she was laid in state outside the Supreme Court, instead of having a military guard, they had her clerks standing guard. It's just very beautiful. And to have that kind of care and concern and love for people, I thought was just so beautiful. It turned out the head of the Kennedy Center in Washington had a close relationship with her, and because she loved the arts, and he was gay, and he asked her if she would marry him, if she would officiate at his wedding. And she said, "I'm sorry, but that's not coming up in the court till June, so I couldn't do anything before June." And within 1 hour of that ruling coming down from the Supreme Court, he received a phone call from her saying, "I'd be happy to do your wedding." And he was the first couple, the first gay couple that got married by a Supreme Court justice. So, but just the thoughtfulness that right in the middle of such a amazing win on the court, that within the hour she would be thinking of him and wanting to make sure that she was supporting him. So to be able to see the Buddha nature in everyone, also, she had a quality that I think would really be useful for all of us to cultivate. And that is one of being able to see the Bodhisattva nature, the Buddha nature in everyone. That one of her best friends on the court was Judge Scalia, with whom she disagreed about everything judicial. But they were able to get beyond that and just really enjoy each other's company. Their families spent New Year's Eve together with Marty doing all the cooking. They would go on vacations together. Probably many of you have seen the pictures of her on the elephant with Judge Scalia. And it was funny because she got criticized for taking a back seat on the elephant. And she said, well, actually, it was a matter of weight distribution. The elephant, the guy who was guiding the elephants told her they needed to do that for weight distribution. So anyway, I think that it's really wonderful. For me, it was so beautiful to go from a place of deep despair and feeling just absolutely devastated to feeling completely inspired and pumped up by the end of it. By the end of that evening, I was already just feeling so inspired. It was wonderful to see when Tai tells us that depending on which seeds in our consciousness we water, that's what manifests. So do we look at this as horrible, terrible, awful, it's the worst thing that could possibly happen, and just focus on how awful it is? Do we accept impermanence and say she was 87 years old, she did more than her best her entire life, and to be eternally grateful for everything that she did? And also, that Tai tells us about death and dying, that we don't die, we continue. Every life we've touched, we're continuing. They are our continuations. And for me to see all of her clerks get interviewed and to be able to hear how inspired they were, in awe of her work ethic, how much they learned from her, how much they learned about mindful speech. One of her clerks said that she always would compose whatever it was she was going to say before she uttered a word, that she was incredibly mindful about her speech. And so he said, I'd always wait 3 or 4 seconds when there was a pause in the conversation, because I didn't know if she was just composing her next sentence or if she was finished. But they were just, you could just feel the love that they all felt for her because of the love she felt for them. So anyway, I think that where I started off was to look at all the places where she bumped into discrimination herself, where she had seen her mother be discriminated against, where she had seen her husband be discriminated against, actually, not being able to get a job in Boston, and how she had this deep, deep passion for standing up to injustice. And even though she was 5 feet tall, she always, whenever she was offering a lecture, people said, she would always say, I'm standing here on the shoulders of giants. She would always give credit to all of the people that came before, all of the people that had helped her, all the people that had supported her, particularly her husband. Her husband was her biggest advocate. And he said later in life that his greatest accomplishment was helping her to be able to fully manifest what she'd come to do. And he was just so proud of her and such a wonderful support. But her humility, that I stand on the shoulders of giants. And it's funny because her being only 5 feet tall, everybody said she appeared to be huge. You know, she seemed to be a giant in so many ways. So I think that just as a wonderful example. To me, she's the embodiment of so many qualities that we were told by the Buddha that we need to cultivate in ourselves. That she was, like I said, the embodiment of deep listening, mindful speech, deep looking, looking deeply in order to understand. And Tai says when we are faced with a difficulty, if we get to the root cause, we find the way out. And she never stopped at, oh, it's my boss that's prejudiced. It was, there is a systemic discrimination built into the system. The system needs to be changed, and I need to be a lawyer so I can do that. It was all very well thought out. So anyway, I don't know if you're feeling as inspired as I am, but I spent most of the week showing up in my RBG t-shirt, my notorious RBG t-shirt, which I've been wearing proudly. And I wanted to end tonight with to play a song that was written for another woman who, the reason for this is that Ruth, one of her main things, she was considered to be so shy and really quiet, unassuming, never was one to take the limelight. And all of a sudden, at 84 years old, she became like a rock star, this icon. They did this documentary, which is a wonderful documentary, by the way, if you haven't seen it. And people were really surprised at how much she enjoyed it. And her friend Nina Totenberg said she really was clear that the reason that Ruth enjoyed it so much was because so many young women were inspired by it. That so many young women could see what she had done with all of her dissents on the court and how powerful she was. Even when she was on the losing side of something, she would just keep plowing ahead. And that all these young people were inspired. And that's what excited her most was, and what she really hoped to accomplish was to inspire young women. And today they announced that actually there are more women in law schools than there are men. So it seems like that's quite a legacy for her to leave as well, because they asked her how many women would she like to see on the Supreme Court. She said 9. And she said they've gone for years with 9 men, so what would be the problem with that? But anyway, so I wanted to play to end tonight. I'd like to play a song that was written for Ella Baker, who was the head of SNCC, or one of the heads of SNCC, Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee during the Civil Rights Movement. And the thing that was most important to Ella was inspiring young people, that's what she focused on entirely, was how could she pass on to young people her experience and what she had learned so they could continue beautifully. And the thing I love thinking about most right now is how beautifully Ruth Ginsburg is continuing. That when I learned that she had touched so many people, I was so excited. It was just great. So I will play this for us. I hope you enjoy it as much as I do. This is Sweet Honey in the Rock, by the way. I hope. We'll see. So, dear friends, I hope you enjoyed that song. I think that it was written by Bernice Reagan Johnson. She was the founder, one of the founders of Sweet Honey in the Rock, And she was one of the people who had been jailed with Martin Luther King a number of times. She would lead the marches with her singing. And that powerful voice you heard was Bernice's, and she wrote the song about Ella Baker. So to me, I love these women that are so inspiring, that can show the rest of us the way, that to stand up for justice. We live in times when the truth and integrity and all other kinds of things are the constructs of the government are really getting challenged. We live in with all the pandemic, all of the challenges that we face, we live in a very, very challenging time. And I feel that despair is an emotion that it's a luxury that we just can't afford, really. Just like Ruth Bader Ginsburg's mother told her, that don't ever give in to useless emotions. It takes away your energy. That's also what she told her, and that's the truth. So we need to maintain our energy and do what we can to help. That we need to be able to help those that are being discriminated against out of love, not out of hatred for the people that are doing the discriminating. That's really important. And I thought it was particularly fitting that Ruth would die on Rosh Hashanah, just before the beginning of Rosh Hashanah. And in the Jewish tradition, people that do that are considered to be a tzaddik. A tzaddik is a person that God has held back from taking for the entire year because they were most needed and most righteous. And I thought, perfect timing on her part. So rather than simply sing her praises and or, like I said, feel devastated or just sing her praises, I think the more fitting tribute to her is to try our best to cultivate, to see what is it in her that we admire, and to cultivate those qualities in ourselves, to strengthen those things in ourselves. Doesn't mean we have to become a Supreme Court justice. It just means we need to do what she did, was manifest the gifts she came in with. And somebody asked her that as well. I can't remember who it was, but somebody came to her and said they were doing something in the arts, I think. And they said, well, maybe I should be a lawyer. And she said, no. You need to do what you came in to do. You need to offer your gifts in the way that you offer them. We all have different things that we bring into this lifetime. So anyway, I hope that I've given you something that you can put to good use, and that could maybe, I don't know if you feel inspired or not, but I hope you can tell that I do. It was just so beautiful to see how when Ty says, depending on what seeds we water, that's what manifests. If I had sat around all night thinking how horrible, terrible, awful things were, I'd be in a dark, dark place. But to be able to expose myself to these inspiring people, I came away just feeling so grateful for everything she'd done, and so confident in how many people she inspired. I loved it. I talked to a friend the other day, and she said she just visited with her granddaughter. Her granddaughter is 6 years old, and for the last 3 years, she's had a shrine in her bedroom to Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and she has all RBG things everywhere. She's got bobbleheads and whatever, but she actually took it upon herself. They were having something going on. I can't even remember what the cause was, but her younger brother and she were taken to the park, and instead of playing at the park, she went and stood on the sidewalk with a placard, and she had a one woman demonstration. So I thought that was really, really exciting. that people at 6 years old are already on it. So we can end with a bell. We can end with one sound of the bell. And I hope that now you'll be able to recognize the bodhisattvas that walk among us. When I think of the bodhisattvas, I don't like to think of them as magical, mystical beings. I like to think of them as, like I said, embodiments of qualities that we all have. When I think of we've had a number of bodhisattvas walking among us. A lot of them we wouldn't even recognize. But, there's been Gandhi and King and Desmond Tutu and Nelson Mandela and John Lewis and Thich Nhat Hanh and the Dalai Lama. And all these people have suffered enormously. And they've put that suffering into action to do some good for other people. So may we all continue beautifully. Thank you so much for being here.